This is the Higher Ed podcast, presented by eCity Interactive. eCity creates websites, marketing campaigns, and magic for higher ed institutions large and small. Every digital challenge has a solution. eCity's talented team of problem solvers will help you find yours. And now, here's your host, Stephen App.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 15 of the Higher Ed podcast. I am your host, Stephen App. Cool show for you today. We are officially in the home stretch of Season 2 here, and keeping the train rolling with a great episode featuring today's guest, Jay Murray. He is the Associate Vice President of Enrollment Services at Western Connecticut State University, and we're going to be talking about CRMs today. It's a topic that is top of mind for a lot of professionals in the enrollment services, enrollment management space, and really excited to get Jay's insight on how Western Connecticut State University came to use their CRM. And, for those of you who are maybe still trying to figure out if you need a CRM, if you have the right CRM, I think we'll be able to provide some valuable insight for you in this show. So let's go ahead and get started into it. Jay, thank you so much for joining the Higher Ed podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me.
I want to talk about, you mentioned the CRMs, and it's interesting to me because CRMs aren't necessarily a new technology anymore, but it's also something that is not so old that we don't remember what life was like before them. So I'm wondering if you could give me and our listeners a glimpse into, just from your standpoint, what was admissions like at Western Connecticut State University before you had a CRM?
Oh, God. Well, it was really interesting here because I don't think the institution knew it needed a CRM or it was something that was even in our lexicon, because for about, when the boomlet came through, when the children of the baby boomers, the millennials went through the enrollment funnel, the institution actually doubled in size from 1994 through about 2009, 2010, when we hit peak full-time undergraduate enrollment. And when you're growing at such a rate, it kind of hides any problems or challenges that you have. And then in that kind of post-economic crash, as the institution started to slowly slide back, as that millennials started to fade through the process, all of a sudden enrollment became a challenge here. And that was when, oh my God, we have to do something. When we're part of a 17 campus system, and when the system office had implemented our student information system back in 99, 2000, 2001, they never implemented the recruitment module of the CRM. So there was, although we had certainly a working process to work with our application flow, we didn't have a place to store inquiries, whether it be cards from the road, web-based inquiries, phone calls, even hot at leads like SAT downloads. We just didn't. So effectively, things were loaded into spreadsheets, and maybe we would do a mail merge to get mail out the door, but it was kind of one-off types of things. So essentially, all of our applications were stealth, because when they entered into our SIS as applications, there was no source code for them because they were coming in just as an app only.
Jay, I'm curious. I mean, you mentioned that working process, right, of trying to figure out, where are these prospective students coming from? Where are these applicants coming from? And, I think also, of course, right, how to conduct a meaningful yield season when you don't necessarily know where they're coming from or what they're interested in. It's got to be a weird situation to be in where you don't have what I think we would now say is critical information, and yet it almost doesn't matter. Did you ever feel like you were walking a tightrope, or was life truly so good that it was not even, on your radar?
Well, that was the interesting thing. The good years preceded my arrival. So I didn't get here till 2013. So things were already kind of in that slowdown phase. And it was, oh my God, we have to do something. And I was actually I was hired as the director of admissions. There was no AVP admission person at that point. I was reporting directly into the provost. So we were also siloed at that point: registrar, admissions, financial aid, academic advising. We were siloed, all direct reports in the provost, on top of not having an inquiry management system. So I think the best way to describe it is the institution didn't know what it didn't know at that point. And it wasn't until we did a kind of a deep dive discovery, and this was led by our CIO at the time. It was a directive from the president of the institution to really kind of dig deep, find out what's going on, what are the pain points of the institution, and what is the low-hanging fruit? What are the things that we could more easily address to have the greatest impact? So we locked about 25 campus leaders, as well as mid-level, as well as frontline. There were clericals in the room, there were directors, there were deans, there were VPs. It was all kinds of all kinds of people at all different levels. And we kind of sat in the room and we process flowed out from start to graduation, what happens to a student. And of course, at most institutions, it's assumed that all the issues are in kind of enrollment. So that's where they focused initially. And there was all these roast beef items there. And I call them roast beef items. And actually, no one on campus knew what I was talking about. And I said, you've never heard the roast beef story. And I said, it's simply put, it's a parent teaching their child how to cook the holiday dinner. And there's a explanation for everything along the process. We do a roast beef because it's a cheap cut of meat, but if cooked well, it serves a lot of people and tastes good. It's going to be so big because we're serving this many people. You season it like this because you want it to marinate it in its juices before it goes in the oven. You want to sit it on the counter to make sure it warms up to room temperature before you cook it, gets it more thoroughly, blah, blah, blah. And at the end, it's like, and then you cut off the ends and throw it in the oven. And, the parent asks, the child asks the parent, so wait, why do you cut off the ends? He goes, no, you just do. He goes, no, there was a reason for everything. Why is there no explanation for cutting off the end? So they go in and ask like one of the grandparents and they say, and you can't see me because he's holding up your hands. We cut off the end because the oven was only this big. And for me, and everyone in the room did exactly what you just said. They laughed, but then they instantly got it because that happens in higher ed all the time. You've adapted a process that everybody swears is the only way to do it, but nobody knows why we do that process. And typically that process is associated with someone who retired 15 years ago. So you can't even ask them. And so we red circled all these items. So think, and when we were done, it was a 23-foot long flow chart of the entire enrollment process at WCSU with all these red circles. And those were the pain points. And out of that, one of the things that was decided, we saw the biggest red circle was the institution's lack of an inquiry management system and the fact that the admissions office had no systematic, calculated, preset way to track, communicate, and report on prospective students.
Jay, you were student journey mapping before student journey mapping was cool. You didn't know it.
I'm a trailblazer.
Yeah. And I am going to use that roast beef. Did you call it a roast beef item? Because that is
roast beef item, and it's kind of taken off, and other people in other departments on campus will bring it up all the time. And it's not mine. I heard this story elsewhere, but it's become my mantra. I talk about it all the time because and the problem with roast beef items, and think about roast beef, it tastes good. So
Right.
You're doing it, you're eating the roast beef, not even realizing that, oh my God, we have not figured this out and this is not the best way to do things.
That is fascinating. Okay, so you're in your process. You have your giant spreadsheet here, documenting the red flags. You realize the CRM is the focal point for this. Where do you go from there? So obviously you decide we're going to start looking at CRMs. Was it still your CIO at the time who was leading that charge?
It was still our CIO. Yeah, he was leading the charge, and he went out and he was also new to the institution. So I had gotten here March 1 of 2013. I think he came December of 2012. So he was relatively new. So he and I were both kind of looking at this with eyes wide open, learning how WCSU did things, but then kind of able to ask the questions because, we didn't know. So we had to ask questions. And then he went off and was talking to his peers and colleagues at other schools. And as he was investigating, okay, I think we need a CRM. I think that's the recommendation to the president. Then he went on the discovery of, okay, which one do we go with? And initially, he had kind of gone into the Salesforce platform, because they had the higher ed licenses. And that was the other thing, the other edict from the president, that we had to do things as inexpensively as we could.
Of course.
So we looked at those higher ed licenses. We looked at the Salesforce platform, and that was the direction we were gonna go. I think he even sent someone of his people off to a Salesforce conference at that point. And that's when we realized that we didn't have the bandwidth to build out, to customize ourselves. We needed more of an out of the box solution, and that's when we kind of looked at TargetX as our essentially app that we use on top of the Salesforce platform.
Hey everyone, the hashtag Higher Ed podcast is part of Connect EDU, a podcast network bringing together brilliant minds in the higher ed space and breaking down silos. You can check it out at connectedu.network, where you can find great shows no matter where you work on campus, as well as resources for first-time and long-time podcasters. You can also follow along on Twitter at ConnectEDUPod and hashtag ConnectEDU. So Jay, you and your CIO, you kind of come to this joint conclusion that for a variety of reasons, TargetX is going to be the right fit for you. I think choosing a CRM maybe isn't almost the part that is probably intimidating to a lot of professionals out there. It's implementing the CRM. So I wonder, can you now talk me through, how did Western Connecticut State University go about implementing TargetX on campus?
Okay, so we went through a very aggressive implementation, and we told that to the folks at TargetX when we signed, because we probably signed around September of 2013, and we told them. They said, "Oh, it's about a 12-week implementation." We said, "Okay, we need you to do it in 8." Because at that point, you figure the recruitment cycle's well underway. Mm-hmm. We're already accumulating additional inquiries from additional sources that we need a place to put. So we said, okay, what if we do a modified and we do a staged implementation? And the first thing we wanted to do was a place to dump our inquiries and then communicate with those students. So that was what we wanted turned on first. And really, we used that roadmap that we had during the discovery to kind of map out, okay, these are the steps we want to take care of. So first, it was really the inquiry management piece. One of the things that we had looked at was, one of the hot leads we got was the SAT scores. Kids who were paid money to send us test scores. Those are as hot as they came, and those were literally sitting in temporary tables on the shelf somewhere in a back server. So that was a big piece that was coming in. Then the students we meet on the road, putting those in, and then coming up with the communication plans to acknowledge their inquiry and then respond to those students at the same time. So that was number one. And training of the staff. That was a big piece, because that was the kind of a pain point for us throughout the process. Was when you think about it, you're implementing this new technology, you're training your staff, you're trying to get them excited, but effectively you've made more work for them, because now they have an additional system to log into, not just the SIS. Now you have a CRM on top of that. So we made more work for people. So that was a challenge. We had to train them. There's a learning curve. It's very, very different from working in the SIS. But we went through that. We did 3 or 4 days of on-campus training, kind of a boot camp type of thing. Then the first major piece we wanted to get to after inquiry was we wanted one-directional communication. So we wanted to use events. We had a big accepted student day coming out in the spring of the following year. So we needed to get our information from our SIS fed back up into the CRM. So we wanted everyone who's been accepted up in the CRM, so then we can communicate and invite them to our accepted student day. And that was phase 2 of the process. And that's when we really started to see the gains. I mean, the tracking the inquiries you would assume would be a gain right away, but that takes long to flush out. But oh my God, all of a sudden we went from being an Excel nightmare for events, with business reply cards, we actually one year had hired a temp to sit there and track all the inquiries and put them into Excel. And then of course with Excel, you have Excel check-in and you have 4 or 5 spreadsheets that you compile back together to even find out who came to the event. So now we were loading everybody into the CRM, inviting them to accepted student day, automatically taking their responses back in the CRM, acknowledging that they were there, communicating reminders, directions, the whole thing. And then one of the neat things that we first did and we first learned and we wanted to try it right away was QR code check-in. That was a basic tenet of the events package, so that the students are register for the event. They get this little QR code, and then when they come to the event, we can scan them in. And we were like, oh, that's cool. We definitely should do that. But we still had the Excel spreadsheets. Well, the first time we did it for our April 2014 Acceptance Student Day, we actually underestimated the number of scanners used, because as going down the line, it turned out every student had their QR code, and we track it mobile. So I'm walking around looking at my cell phone, and it's telling me minute by minute how many students are checking in as they're checking in. And that's very powerful, particularly since, you're trying to become a data-driven institution. And instead of anecdotally, the room looks full, I'm saying, no, Mr. President, there's actually, 400 students have checked in today, and they're here and they're ready to go. So that was kind of a game changer for us. And then, certainly then we could trigger immediately after the event, thank you for attending to anyone who attended, but also anyone who registered and didn't check in. We can say, hey, we saw you registered and didn't attend to the event. Our next visit day is on this date. Please be sure to register. We'd love to have you on campus. So that was neat for us. It was the ease of response, the ease of communication, but also the instantaneous nature of the information that we were getting.
Jay, you're talking about, right, this is all made possible because you're able to create this bi-directional communication between TargetX and your SIS, and I believe you guys are using Banner for that.
Yes, we are a Banner school, correct.
So how challenging was that implementation, and how, who was required from your team to make that possible? Because that would sound to me, now granted, these are two pretty established systems at this point, but that would seem to me to maybe be a pretty difficult task.
It was. So initially we started with one-way communication, and the team that we were working with was myself representing admissions, our at the time he was our web manager, our manager of web development, and he had additional bandwidth at that time, so his role had space to do more things, and he had the technical skill. And then we had a third person who served as the banner lead. So it was the three of us kind of working together to kind of chart, and we met daily on this. Okay, what's next? What's this? What's that? And we kind of, I don't know, MacGyvered that initial implementation because really we weren't thinking 4 or 5 years down the road. We were thinking, okay, we want to do Accepted Student Day, we want to do inquiries, let's do X, Y, Z. So it was one-way communication, and actually it was a one-time feed at that point to get anybody newly accepted prior to the event up into the system, up into the CRM, Banner up. Then in the summer of 14, we became a member of the Common App. Now we had to figure out bi-directional communication. And
right.
That's when things got a lot more challenging. Also, the person who was the Banner lead left for a position at another institution. So now Jeff and I, neither one are Banner experts. Now we're really kind of in the weeds. So we're bringing in other resources. There was our operation manager in admissions is kind of brought in because she's working with the day-to-day processing of the application. We pulled in another Banner lead up from our IT department to really answer those questions, what goes where and why in the system. And what we discovered over time is the CRM was our friend. And when we had challenges, it wasn't the CRM, it was you have to give Banner the things the way Banner wants them, or Banner won't take them. So that and so we were, if yes, in our CRM we could have an apple and orange and a kiwi fruit, but we sent it downstream, it had to be an apple.
Right.
So once we figured that out, we realized that what we want to do is we want to start everything in the CRM and then send down the stuff into the SIS that's required by the other users down the road. So at that point, our CRM became our system of action. So all inquiries and all applications started in the CRM and then were fed downstream in the SIS. And the bi-directional communication was, the application started in the CRM, was pushed into the SIS to get the system ID, which was then set back up to the CRM so that they would be matched and connected from that point forward. And then any significant decision that's made in Banner would then be going up as needed back in the CRM, so we could always track and report on our students. And we'll call that phase 3 of the implementation.
Man, and that is all happening in a span of, right, you mentioned that kind of 8-week phase 1, but
yeah, we're now.
When did you feel like, okay, we're good, we've got this now?
I think we were so we went live in the system in November of 2013. We went live with our bidirectional communication with the Common App coming in probably 10 months later. So we'll call it early fall 2014. I would say we felt like we had it together sometime during that cycle of the 2014-2015 applicant year, because now we're on the Common App. Our applications are up 40% for first-time, first-year
Wow,
students.
40%.
Yeah, I mean, again, the Common App does that, but then we realized if we had gone to the Common App and we're just working our SAS, we would have been overwhelmed. But now we have kind of the CRM doing a lot of the heavy lifting for us. And I think we started to feel comfortable with the process, and then we kind of have, we can move on to new things at this point. We've kind of solved the 800-pound gorilla. Now we can really try to refine and engineer our process as we move forward.
Jay, we keep talking about this process in terms of phases, phase 1 all the way back in the fall of 2013 to where you are now. I'm curious for you, as we kind of have this recording today, what is the next step for you in terms of kind of taking your CRM to the next level?
One of the things we realized over time as we were continuing to re-engineer and reinvent the process as we move forward after that, those initial first 3 phases, is one of the things we identified is that our bidirectional communication, our data integration hub, wasn't robust enough. We wanted to do more, and we kept, back to those original conversations with the 3 of us back in 2013, 2014, we realized that there were things we hadn't thought about that as they came up years later, we wanted to do that. We realized that we couldn't from the initial way we had kind of set up the process. So our next phase, which we're actually finishing up now, we're using Axiom Elite as our partner to improve that bidirectional communication, because we want to, our SIS will continue to be the system of record for the institution, but with this bidirectional communication, we're going to move our CRM from being the system of action to also being the system of record for the admissions process. So we're going to go to decisions in the CRM. We're going to go to only sending the stuff downstream that's needed by Banner, but doing as much as possible, including decisions, probably even decision letters, and actually moving to taking us paperless. So we're going to automate our push so that the data hub is doing the matching. The data hub is doing the talking between the 2 systems, and literally it's going to be, instead of someone coming in the morning looking at a file and manually taking that file and dropping it somewhere, that this system is going to be doing that for us on its own, finding the errors, doing all the fixes. So we come in the morning, we turn it on. Oh my God, we got 100 applications and they're ready to go the next day.
So Jay, I think, in my mind, when we talk about the core benefit of a CRM, right, we're talking about information and, and empowerment based on knowledge. Can you talk a little bit about some of the ways that your team has used the information obtained through the CRM to improve your operations and improve your own performance?
So on a macro level, I'm using the data to plan out, what are the wins and losses? On basic level, let's look at that funnel. Let's look at the performance through the funnel. Let's send out reports to the deans, department chairs, the other executive level people about what happened. For the staff, it's been very empowering because they now have access to information that even if they thought about the question in the past, they would have to put in a request to, maybe institutional research, or later on when we became more sophisticated, we got our own data enrollment analysts in the enrollment services area to ask for the information. Now they can go into the CRM, open up TargetX and say, okay, show me all the students from Danbury High School because that's where I'm recruiting this year, and I want to know what happened. What's the average student? How many people applied, used the Common App? How many people came to the accepted student day? How many people enrolled? And that's at their fingertips. So from a territorial management standpoint, from an empowering the staff to make decisions based on data as opposed to, oh, I went to Smithtown High School last year, I'm just going to go to Smithtown High School again. No, to actually looking up what happened at the school, who were the students, were they quality applicants? Did they apply early in the process? Did they come from search? Did I meet them on the road? So the staff can go into the system and get that information and really make informed decisions, but then also be on the road at a event and have a student come up who's applied with a question, and they can look the student up on their cell phone. That is, I think, the biggest thing for the staff is the mobile, the ability to access the information from anywhere.
I imagine from your standpoint, Jay, where you've talked about kind of that macro level of information and planning, how have you been able to use the data to make decisions? And I think even more so than make decisions, I don't want to say argue, but to maybe defend your position or your opinion to peers and other members of senior leadership on campus?
That's actually a great question, because I think, and this is probably the same at a lot of institutions, WCSU was inherently anecdotal in how it approached things. You'd sit in meetings and you'd hear about a great student from Philadelphia, and why don't we get more students from Philadelphia, because we had a great student once from Philadelphia. And, before having the CRM, people would sit around and, harumph, I agree with him. And when you're sitting there with the CRM, I'll open it up and I'll say, oh, well, actually, over the last 10 years, we've only gotten 10 total applications from Philadelphia. One is applied. That's not a viable funnel of activity. But on the flip side, when I'm using it to make my argument, we got permission to do this in-state tuition pilot program with one of our neighboring states, New York. And so as I've been tracking data for the presidents, so he can report it back to the Board of Regents, I'm able to show him, okay, this is the funnel. This is what it used to look like from New York. This is what it looks like now. Because of what it's doing, this is what the impact is on enrollment. And this is why I need an additional staff member to service these students, because the volumes come to a point that I need to add somebody else just to handle the applications and the recruitment of students from that territory moving forward. And that's powerful. I mean, I would just be, telling a story before, but now I have the data to back it up. And also then the ROI on the project. When we launched that initiative, it had a very lofty goal. I think the break even on new students was 145 new students from the territory to break even. I mean, that is, at our tuition, that's a $1.4 million ask. And so I'm tracking it through the CRM from day one and projecting out to the president. Okay, this is where we are now. This is how many kids have to apply. This is how many I have to accept to get those numbers. And so as I'm moving through, I knew we were going to exceed that target from the beginning, so that I could start sleeping at night to this goal. And I say to people on campus sometimes when they say, oh, well, your enrollment's good now because of the New York State Initiative. No, again, just like when we went to the Common App, we could not have handled the volume that this initiative created if I didn't have TargetX to track and report the information and more or less communicate with the students, for goodness sake.
Right. Yeah, and it's funny you talk about the out-of-state student from a neighboring state. I know, we've talked in the past, Jay, and we've talked about, on the flip side, your local students. And I know you briefly touched on your on-campus events earlier, but I think it's interesting. You mentioned that local students, that the data has helped you, has helped change your perception on why maybe local students aren't visiting campus. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, one of the things, and again, this was anecdotal. Actually, this isn't anecdotal. It was reality. For a school that's enrolling a class of 1,600 new students every fall, I always felt that our visit volume was very light. this is my first stint at a public institution. I'd always work at privates, and at one of the privates where I worked, any holiday was like, oh my God, it looked like an open house. You're talking 200, 250 people there each day. And so we have Columbus Day coming up this coming Monday, and it'll be a busy visit day for us, but we might have 50, 60 families. Not anything overwhelming. And when we went to TargetX and we're looking at events, we discovered that our local folks aren't likely to visit because they feel they know the institution. And the data was showing that when we run our events data at the end of the year. But it also showed that because they knew us or felt that they knew us, it did not visiting didn't have a negative impact on enrollment, which at other schools, you would look at the data and students who would visit are more likely to enroll. Here, if you didn't visit, it wasn't negative. But with our out-of-state students who we're trying to recruit because we're not an unknown entity to them, getting them on campus did move the needle. And the TargetX CRM enabled us to break down that data and come up with strategies to address that.
Jay, aside from the events which we've touched on, of course, in this episode, can what are some of the other features that you're really taking advantage of within TargetX?
One of the things that I think, initially, you always hear email's dead, snail mail's dead. And in fact, they're not dead. It's kind of a multi-channeled approach, but we use text messaging. That was one of the bundled features that came. I think the service that we use that's bundled is SMS Magic. And we do, text messages, particularly in combination with events, as that last minute reminder, hey, you registered for the event, it's tomorrow, with a link to directions. And we tend to, so we don't overwhelm the students, we tend to use our text for later on in the process. So it's email and snail mail at the beginning. You get into the decision-making process and it's paper, the snail mail for decision letters. But then all three of them towards the end, where we're going to do email, we're going to do text, and we're going to do letters. And the text really, we found, because we don't want them to opt out early on. So when we use text later on, we find that when the students get towards that later part of the funnel, that's their preferred way of getting that immediate information. So it's, acceptance student day is this Saturday, it's deposit deadline is coming up, and we actually will even text the parents. So we'll do a parent comm plan using the information we gather from the Common App to email and or text the parents when we really need them to do something at the end of the process.
You talk about text and email. How much of that process is automated through TargetX, and how much are you scheduling maybe manually based on new information that's coming in the process or deadlines, or is it almost entirely automated at this
I think
point?
our automation for emails and text is probably 50-50. When it comes to events, the comm plan is completely automated. So it's, that's almost 100% when we do an event. But say if we're doing things, throughout the year, we might have peak time standard communications, which are going out on a regular basis. Those are scheduled in advance. We're gonna do application deadline reminder email. We're gonna do it's time to file the FAFSA reminder. But we might also do ad hoc. One of the things I like to do for Christmas Eve is I send out an email congratulating all the following fall students who've already been admitted prior to Christmas. I send them congratulations, welcome to WCSU, happy email. And, mainly because I think it's a nice touch. I know those can go horribly wrong, but we check it twice. But that's an example of things that we're going to do ad hoc that are kind of neat, because you kind of sit around and you think, okay, what can we do that's value add?
So Jay, let's talk about value add, right? Because some of the value of a TargetX over other CRMs like a Slate is the fact, and you've mentioned it earlier, the fact that it is so customizable. Can you talk about some of the future plans that you have for Western Connecticut in terms of where do we go from here? What are some of the new capabilities that you have on your wish list since we just talked about Christmas Eve?
Excellent. This is what's in my bag, that my list this year. We're going to move to office paperless. We have a great opportunity. We've had some staff changes that are going to necessitate this, and we always thought we wanted to do this and never pulled the trigger. I think we kept eating the roast beef and liked it, and now we've realized that, okay, you know what? We're taking this information that's coming to us in PDF or in electric form, and we've been printing it, putting it in a manila folder, which, is not very green, but also it's a cumbersome, time taking process that, okay, if we can innovate this, what would our next step be? It would be to go paperless. Let's review online. We have a tool that's been delivered us, decision module from TargetX that enable us to do this. We want to make TargetX our system of action. This moves it even more to the system of record. That we would only be pushing the information, those significant decisions downstream. We're going to improve our data integration hub using Axiom Elite to do that matching process and the deduping and everything, so that we can comfortably make our decisions in our CRM, revolutionize kind of the process for us. But also there's a work savings there, not producing the paper application, but also a increase in response time to our customers, our prospective students. I think there's a benefit there, and that's kind of my big wish list. I guess it's not a wish list anymore because it's going to happen. I'm hoping to get this turned on within the next 30 days. I actually have a meeting about it this afternoon. But that's going to be big for us, because I think that's going to be a game changer. And I think my staff are ready for it. I think my operations staff are excited about it, because I've just kind of revolutionized their work day, so to speak. So instead of working in paper, they're working electronically. Their cleanup is on a computer scene, not taking the time to match up the 10 pieces of paper that come in for every application. So this is going to be a game changer for us, I think.
Hey everyone, a quick shout out to the agency that makes this show possible, eCity Interactive. I really do love coming to work every day at eCity, and that's not just because everyone shares my love of donuts, but that's really because I get to collaborate with a talented team working on everything from user experience to content and digital marketing to web design and development and a whole lot more. Our work has earned us an incredible roster of education clients, including the University of Pennsylvania, George Washington University, Petty School, Cornell, Drexel, Rutgers, and many others. So if you're looking to improve your web and digital presence and better communicate your school's story, visit us online at ecityinteractive.com and get in touch. Well, Jay Murray, thank you so much for joining me on the hashtag Higher Ed podcast to talk about really the very cool things that you are doing using TargetX specifically and CRMs generally to improve the efficiencies. And I think you mentioned the customer service that you're providing to your prospective students at Western Connecticut State University. Before we let you go, a couple housekeeping matters that we always take care of. First of all, for listeners who want to find you online, maybe ask you questions about your experiences, etc., where can they find you?
I am on Twitter at @JEdwardMurray. I'm on LinkedIn. Those are kind of the big work related. Although I'm on Instagram as well if you want to follow my food and travel items.
And of course, each week on the show, we ask our guests to give a social shout out to a colleague or an individual that you feel deserves a little bit more recognition of their work. And Jay, I will turn the floor over to you on that.
Yeah, I think I'm going to give a shout out to Gil Rogers, who's now at Platform Q. And he's been a colleague. He's a former admissions guy. He's been around the block a couple times. We catch up at conferences, and I think he does some good things. He's got some a good story to tell, and he's certainly been a good friend and a good resource through the years.
Yeah, big fan of Gil on this show. Really, I think you nailed it. Has such an interesting background. It makes him incredibly knowledgeable and a really helpful resource for those of us who are in the enrollment marketing space. Well, Jay, one more time, thank you so much for joining the hashtag Higher Ed podcast. I hope that your Christmas list comes true and that next time we chat with you, you've gone full paperless. Regardless, really excited to see where things end up on the western side of Connecticut, and we'll stay in touch.
All right. Thank you so much.